Well, one of the great joys that I have as your pastor is to introduce you to some of the great speakers in our country. And we've had some really good folks come in the last several months. We had Michael Thompson back in September. We had Greg Jantz come in January. We had Tom Egham come and speak. We had Kimberly just a couple weeks ago. I mean, some of the really top-notch, top-level folks. And tonight we've got another. See, they're clapping for you, Kimberly. Yeah, they like you. I get notes all the time. Tim, please take more vacations, and which I'm happy to do. So we've got another great one tonight. Michael and I have been friends for a long, long time now, about 7 years or so. And the way that our relationship started was when we started this church. I became very, very interested in the task that the church has in reaching men. And we've talked a lot about this. We're having a hard time reaching men. We're having a hard time reaching boys. So I wrote Michael an email after reading some of his books, and I said, I know that you're helping teachers do a better job of reaching boys in the classroom. Can you help us do the same thing in the church? And to my surprise, within a day or two, he wrote back. He said, I would love to talk to you about this. We began a relationship, and we worked on a couple projects together that you've seen us model here with our boys program and our girls program, Rites of Passage. And we've just become really good friends in the process of this because we have a common passion together, and that's to help people, not just parents and grandparents, but all of us, better understand our boys and our girls so that we can all together raise them to be the next generation that will lead this country into greatness and will lead our world into greatness and change the world. So tonight, Michael's going to come, and we're going to have a little conversation together that you can listen into about girls. He was here this morning for 3 hours, and it was awesome. We learned so much good stuff about girls. And tonight we're going to kind of tease out a little bit of it and to just give you an overview of some of the things that we learned, and then I'll tell you how you can get some resources so you can learn more. So one of the things I always like to bug Michael about is he's a New York Times best-selling author. So, I mean, he's a really big deal. And I told people this morning, I'll tell you tonight, you'll want to at least touch him because then you've touched a New York Times best-selling author. It doesn't happen often. But he's such a good guy, and you're going to enjoy his insights. So would you please welcome New York Times best-selling author, Michael Gurian, right here.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks for being here.
So now, if I'm New York Times bestseller, you're the very reverend.
That's right, and not anywhere near New York Times best-selling author.
Go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Michael, before we kind of dive in, we're going to talk about the wonder of girls, and they just are such a wonder. They're such a gift. Give us a little bit of your background. You are a dad, and you live in a household with a lot of female estrogen and so on going on in there. So tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so I've been married to Gail for, on May 10th, it's 28 years. And then we have two daughters, Gabrielle and Davida. And Gabrielle's in China right now in the Peace Corps, and Davida is a junior at the University of Washington. And we were joking that we peaked at 7 pets, and all the 7 pets were female. So it was all female at one point. So that's the family side. There is a research side, too.
So this isn't just theory. You have lived this
I've
stuff,
lived it,
right?
yeah, right.
So how did you get interested, before we talk about girls, how did you get interested in this whole brain science research and developmentally how boys learn and girls learn?
Yeah, I actually started this out before I had kids. So 1983 to 85, I was in graduate school, and I was kind of bothered by the fact that there was a lot of dialogue about gender, which was a very important dialogue, but most of the dialogue was about socialization. So I wanted also to learn about what was going on in the brain, and as a kid, we had traveled all over. My dad was an academic, and then he was a State Department. He joined the State Department, Foreign Service. So we traveled quite a bit, and I could feel that there were patterns of behavior that seemed similar world over between males and females. So what I wanted to do is have the gender roles dialogue and also add the gender and the brain dialogue. That's how I first got into it, and then of course it has expanded since.
And one of the things the Gurian Institute does then is you help teachers through seminars using best practices, brain science research to say these are settings where boys learn best, these are settings where girls learn best. And you've kind of done the same thing for us in the church here, and we're so grateful. So
thank you.
Tonight, let's spend a little bit of time talking about the wonder of girls and the awesome gift that girls are. And as you said this morning, boys and girls are made up of various parts. We've got the brain, we've got nurture, how we're raised, and then we've got kind of the social context, the community context. So let's spend a little time on the brain. Let's talk about the girl brain, so to speak, and some things that makes a girl wonderful, but different from boys, so that we kind of understand how girls operate and function in the world for the most part.
Yeah, and we always want to say there are 3.5 billion girls in the world, so there's a lot of variety. And there are certain, all over the world, females have processed more of the world through white matter. So white matter is the part of the brain that sends signaling all through the brain. And gray matter is when you do a task in one part of the brain. That's your gray matter, white matter. Well, girls are processing through 10 times more white matter. So they are connecting a lot of dots that a lot of times we guys don't get. They're connecting a lot of dots. And that is a huge asset. It's a beautiful thing. Also, for a number of reasons, biochemical, oxytocin is a bonding chemical. Females have a lot more oxytocin, and they tend to process more of the world through direct empathy. They feel someone else's pain fast, and they try to get right to it. And that direct empathy, I believe that that's part of why civilization has survived, is that there are people who are right there being directly empathic. That's something else that I think is absolutely beautiful. And also, girls are very verbal, and they connect a lot of words to feelings and a lot of words to senses. And that creates an amazing texture to life. So those are just 3. There are many.
So girls tend to be wired in their brains and even chemically for relationships that tend to be more emotive, more verbal. And that can be a great blessing, but what are some of the challenges for that when it goes to the extreme for girls?
Okay, yeah, and then on the challenge side, everything is a plus and minus. On the challenge side, operating out of so much white matter and connecting so much dots can mean you just can't get your brain to shut down, And it can also mean that you react to things and you may ruminate on things. And girls will often ruminate on things for long periods of time that they might find they go into a dark place. And really, in reality, there wasn't a lot to ruminate on. So that's something to watch for and that we can help girls
All right,
with.
so let's give us just a little example of that.
Okay.
You mentioned this morning, for example, they can ruminate on just a look.
Yeah.
And a boy looks at them and they can spend hours trying to interpret what that look meant.
Hours, days. Yeah, they can think that one of their friends have looked at them a certain way or said some words, and they'll just interpret that and spend a couple days thinking. And part of what they end up thinking, which we have to work with, is that they feel like there's something wrong with them. Sometimes they'll lash out, obviously, anyone would, but also, sadly, they'll think there's always something wrong with them, and so that would be an example. And there are parts of the brain, the female brain, there's 4 times more activity in a part of the brain called the cingulate gyrus, where you're paying attention, that part of the brain. And if that look that girl gave or the boy gave gets into that loop, that can go on for days.
All right, so at the risk of sounding like a male sexist guy, talk about girl drama then.
Yeah, that's girl drama.
Girl drama. And because we as parents experience that.
Right.
And moms have experienced it with their daughters, and probably every woman here experienced that, particularly when they're teenagers. What causes that kind of dramas? The things we've already talked about?
Well, yeah, some of it's brain and some of it is biochemistry. You do see some of this drama when kids are young, and I'll go into my own life. When my girls were in preschool, you certainly saw some. Then, however, they get to be 9, 10, 11. So whenever pre-puberty hits and the hormones start going, and then through adolescence, that's when it can really get intense, because not only is the brain doing some things where it's interpreting and, but also the hormones are hitting the brain. And there are a lot of parts of the brain that when your hormones hit those parts of the brain, things that are small become big. And then you got to process it through. And that can take many, many days. So when we talk about girl drama, we're talking about the brain, we're talking about the hormones, and of course we're talking about the culture and the society and how they handle that. If we elongate or distend or extend that by saying, yes, you're right, everyone else is bad and you're right, or something like that, and that goes on for days, we may actually not be helping the girl. It may be that we got to have someone say, okay, I feel for you, but what's the solution? On the other hand, if we never give them sympathy for these feelings they're having, then that's going to backfire. They're going to feel constantly criticized and like there's something wrong. So we have to find a balance. And I'm begging people to look for the balance in putting together maternal and paternal nurturance, however that works in their family or community. Maternal nurturance tends to be more, tell me more about that, and I feel for you and I want to hear more. And paternal nurturance tends to be a little more distant from it because Guys don't tend to process as much of it, so we tend to be a little more into the problem solving and how do we, if that's a failure, how do you build success out of that failure? And so my hope is that we can give girls both.
Okay. So we've got parents here, a lot of parents, grandparents. We've got some educators, some of the folks, they teach Sunday school. We know that the girls tend to process things verbally, emotionally. What are ways that we can best bond then with girls in ways that will draw the best out of them? What are some of the things that we can do, taking advantage of these great gifts that their brains have and all these hormones? What are great ways for us to relate to our daughters and girls?
Well, I think I think we all instinctually kind of get girls, at an instinctual level. But if we're making an error, let's figure out where that error is. So for some of us, I'll speak for myself, sometimes I don't listen long enough. I'm like, oh, I got that, and then let's move on. So one thing that people like me can do is listen for a little longer and try to hear all the not just the feelings, but all the white matter stuff that's happening, because they're going to be connecting a lot of dots, and I need to listen a little longer. Another thing we can do is to paraphrase back. Quite often, for her to feel bonded and to feel valued, she will really want us to do something, not artificial, but something where we say, okay, I think what you're saying is this. Is that what you're saying? And she'll go, yeah, and then she'll feel heard. Well, now that in itself can be just beautiful for her. And that may be the solution, just to feel heard. And then once she's felt heard, then we could move to a solution. So that reflecting back is very, very important. It's important for all human beings, but folks ought to know that, with the bonding chemical and the brain stuff, girls are hungrier for it verbally. Guys want to be respected, but they may tend to try to prove themselves physically or intellectually, etc. They may not be looking for us as much to do that. But girls are processing a lot more than we realize, and they need that. Now, if we're on the other side and we're a different person than me, say, someone who just listens but doesn't give solutions, doesn't really help supervise, doesn't help the girl figure out where the boundaries of anger are, and all of that, then I would beg that person to try to do more of the supervising, the mentoring, the directing. And after you've listened for a while, okay, help them find a solution, because they're going to become adults and they need solutions.
So let's talk about self-esteem for girls. It seems to be they seem to derive their self-esteem differently than boys. And it seems like a number of our girls really wrestle with that, particularly as they're going through their teen years. What are some of the things that are triggers for girls when it comes to self-esteem that rob them of their self-esteem, and then things that we can do to help them build a healthy sense of self-esteem?
That's a big one.
In 3 minutes.
Okay, that's a big one. Yeah, I think we tend as a culture to both underprotect girls' self-esteem and overprotect girls' self-esteem. So let me take that angle. The underprotection comes when we don't really understand them, and we don't understand their gifts, and we really don't know how to draw them out. And this often happens with girls who are a little shyer, what we might call more introverted, girls who have ADD and we don't even realize it, which makes them pretty shy, etc. And we just underdevelop them. We don't call on them enough, etc. We don't bring their gifts out of them. So that's the underdevelopment of it, the underprotection of it. And of course, often we over-criticize these girls, and we don't realize, like a coach, this often happens, I'll get email about a coach. So I get email from teenage girls, and they'll say, my coach is constantly berating me the way he does the boys. It works for the boys. It doesn't work for me. So that's just an example of the style he has developed. He's trying to bring the best out of her, but he doesn't understand her. So that can really hurt her. Now, on the overprotecting side, we tend to think, well, if I say anything, it's going to harm her self-esteem, as if they're fragile and made of porcelain. And so I better not do that. So my daughter, let's say, has gained 20 pounds, but no one's saying that to her, even though that's a health risk, right? But I want to protect her self-esteem. So I'd say, no, someone's got to talk to her about this. This is an unhealthy behavior. And so at that point, we don't want to overprotect. We want to say, what do you need? How do we fix this? How do we deal with this? So I would caution all of us to watch the ways we underprotect and the ways we overprotect, because we instinctively work with girls around protection. it's instinct for us to want to protect girls. It's a human instinct. And we just got to navigate it and see where we're at.
Yeah, like Grandpa running after his little granddaughter when she's crying because she didn't see me just a few moments ago. I got to just go rescue her right away.
Great,
right?
Yeah.
So you've raised daughters now. They're in their 20s. What are some of the things that our girls are facing today in the 21st century that are really kind of landmines for them now as they go through life? And maybe they always have been, but they're really exasperated now in this new instant media culture. What are some of the things our girls are wrestling with?
Okay, let me give a few. One is what we call stereotype threat. So stereotype threat is that they think they can't do it. They've seen stereotypes of them not doing it. They think they can't do it. Famous examples would be doing science, for instance. A lot of girls who could do science think they can't do it because they've felt a stereotype that girls can't do it. Okay, so stereotype threat can be anywhere and in anything. And we really got to watch for that, right? A second thing would be, well, we mentioned obesity. These health risks, like obesity. We didn't face that as much 100 years ago, right? So that's a health risk that girls are facing now that we all have to step in on and deal with. So those health risks, media, they're taking in so many images, and it's not just images, but they're spending so much time in front of screens that it is impacting brain development. So if we have a 10-year-old girl and she's looking at the iPad at school an hour and a half, comes home, looks at the computer, the laptop, or whatever to do some assignment, then watches a video, then and is texting. It could be 3-4 hours in front of a screen. Okay, that's going to impact brain development. So it's really important to know that and to look at that and to try to do less screen time and more physical, kinesthetic objects, nature, more of what the human being was sort of built for. And it's not that media is bad, it's not. It's that we need to have balance. Right. So those are three.
How about the sexualization of girls that we're seeing so much today?
Oh, yeah. It's, the imagery is just so intense. And it's hard to protect them from it. And so what I did with my daughters, and this is anecdotal because I really don't know of one magic bullet on this, because the imagery is coming from everything. And it is tough, unless one is living far away in the country without TV, it's tough for the imagery not to happen. So what I tried to do all through their lives was constantly talk to them about the science of it, because that's what I knew. So I would constantly say, okay, what are you learning from this? Like, it could be teaching you this. Is it teaching you this? No, Dad, it's not teaching me that. Yeah, but what are you learning from this? So from these stories, from these movies, etc. And another thing that I really hope we will do is we'll keep the computers, etc., even the smartphones, if they're abusing the smartphones, keep them out of the bedroom for as long as we can, however late that is in their, can we do it till 12 or 13? That would be great if we could, because they're accessing so much through that. So that's something we can do structurally, but in terms of how to mentor them, I just think we have to be so engaged and so constantly communicating that they can ask us anything. And if there's anyone who's squeamish about talking about sex with a 9 or 10-year-old, I beg you, don't be squeamish anymore, because that 9 or 10-year-old is seeing things. Right. So let's us be in that dialogue as early as as the child has maturity. Now,
one of the things Kimberly and I have talked about quite a bit when it comes to our girls and even our women, one of the great gifts of the feminist movement of the last century was that it opened up every option available to girls and to women. When I was a kid, it wasn't quite the same as it is now. I've got a daughter now who's got a law degree, and 40, 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. But it has also opened up for many girls and women this concept, I can do anything, so I have to be everything. Mm-hmm. And we even have some books coming out in culture now suggesting that women can have it all, which seems to put pressure on a gender or a part of our society which already has issues dealing with the pressures of having to be perfect. So how do we help our daughters move through this great window of opportunity where you can be anything you want to be? There are all kinds of choices, but you can't be everything. And how do we help them learn that gift?
Yeah, I absolutely, and Gail as well, my wife, we've talked to our daughters about everything is open to you. It's amazing. It's amazing life for girls in the U.S. especially, and going to have to make choices. And so I talk about options feminism. I'm a women's rights advocate, and I'm very active, but I'm an options feminist. The feminism that I've been a part of is to try to make sure that girls have all the options. But I don't think, and I don't think my daughters think, that they have to get to the top of a corporation to have self-esteem. And so that kind of an attitude we, in our family, have said no to. You know, you got every option. If you want to get to the top of a corporation, great, but we're not going to try to push you to that. And you mentioned stress, and that's really, girls are experiencing so much more depression and anxiety now than they did 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, I would hazard 30 years ago. Right. So much more anxiety and depression, clinical anxiety and depression. And one of the reasons is that they are simply under too much stress. And stress affects both boys and girls. And stress affects boys. They can be depressed and anxious. It also makes them fully withdraw quite often. But girls, they can get depressed and anxious, and they'll still try to function. And they'll still, a lot of them will still try to be perfect. And they'll still try to do 10 things at once. So in terms of a takeaway, I'm begging people, if they have a girl who is somewhat depressed or seems very anxious, to help her find the 2 or 3 things that she's great at. Focus her through those. She does not have to do 10 things. And when she's an adult, hopefully she's modeled that as a kid, so when she's an adult, she'll be able to do 2 or 3 things great and not feel like if she doesn't do 10 things, she's a failure.
Right. So you are now dad of some 20-something girls. You're this New York Times best-selling author, writing books about girls and all that. What are things that you know now that you wish you knew when you first had your daughters, that maybe you would do differently?
These are mistakes I made. Oh, yeah.
Or maybe not even mistakes, but just things, I didn't know this before, but if I'd known that, this is what I do now.
They're mistakes. I was too harsh with my kids when they were young. I coached them in soccer, both my girls, because I used to play soccer before my injury. So I coached them in soccer, and I was that guy who was constantly yelling at them, go here, go there, go there. And they just, now, they're like, Dad, that was too much. And so I was very much like the coach who was relating to them like I had been coached as a boy, So I would say one of the things that I know now is that the harsh tone, the constant directing them toward design, not letting them figure it out themselves. And by design, I mean, if you've ever played soccer, there is actually a design to it, right? There's 11 players, they all have a role, all of that. And I was just over-controlling the design and not feeling the human beings. Okay. And so one of the things I think I've learned is feel those human beings, A second area I would say is the verbal. I mean, I've studied it, I've written books on it, but I just was not as verbally emotive. And as you know, I'm a mental health counselor, right? So I provide therapy to people so I can talk. But with my daughters, I just didn't quite read as well as I should have, that they needed a little more, before I started problem solving. They just needed a little more from me. So I think that's probably another area of error.
But it's not too late.
Oh, no, it's not too late.
Redemption's always possible.
There is
for us
redemption,
dads
that's right.
Who blew it. So we're going to wrap up. We're going to do something special for our daughters tonight. And to do that, I want to go back to something you said this morning, which was, everything you said was brilliant, but this is one thing that sort of stuck with me.
You're too nice.
You talked about how important it is to identify 1 or 2 gifts in a girl and say, this is what you're really good at. And then to come back a couple days later and say, this is what you're really good at, and keep affirming that. That's what we call the blessing. And it was, I think, in part, it was sort of your way of saying, this is the way to take some of the load off of the girls, to not, you don't have to be everything, but this is really what you seem to be good at. Talk about the power of moms and dads, or a man and woman's blessing in the lives of girls today, and affirming them.
Okay, another big one. Well, so I like to say maternal and paternal nurturance, to look at it from that point of view, because sometimes there are dads who are very maternal and moms who are very paternal. Generally, dads tend to be more paternal and moms more maternal. So I'm going to say it that way, that moms and dads, or maternal and paternal nurturance, tends to be a little different, and girls need both, and they need the blessing of both. Maternal nurturance tends to be this direct empathy, real quick at feeling it, and bonding with it, and helping with it, and hearing it, listening to it, taking it in. That's really important, and hopefully what comes out of that is not just all the good feeling of that, but also some gifting, some blessing of. What I loved about the way you handled that was with Anna and Davida and so on, the way you handled it was you didn't stoop to their level or whatever. I mean, it really would be whatever the mom says that she instinctually sees. And so I think it's great if they get maternal nurturance and blessing. And with dads or paternal nurturance, the dad is often blessing the risk. He's often blessing the more independent behavior. He doesn't often he doesn't do it by merging with this daughter, because he just doesn't have as much going on emotionally. So, and I'm saying often because there are exceptions. So he sees her at a little bit of a distance, and that's also good because he can bless her and say, I like how you did this, or you could have done this. What about that? Could you have done that? How would have that worked? He can debate with her, and even push her and challenge her. And that's a real neat blessing that dads can give, or whoever's doing paternal nurturance, to challenge, and then to help lead toward independent risk-taking. So we got to have both of those, and they're both giving lots of blessings.
So, Alicia, when you and I were butting heads all the time, it was just my way of saying, this is how much I love you, all right? So, now, just to come on this real quickly, there are obviously people here who have moms, but there's no dad in the picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're saying that a male's blessing, a male's influence on our daughters is really, really important. All the research says that. Mm-hmm. So what do families do where there's not a dad in the picture?
Well, this is a really complex one because we know that for what the research is saying, as I read it, is that if boys don't have a father and don't have a male mentor, this could be, danger. This can lead to violence, prison, etc. If girls don't have a father and a male mentor, and we're talking about this generally 10 to 20, if this happens, it's generally after divorce or there's been a death and the kid is 10 to 20, let's say, that it affects them, but it doesn't necessarily mean, that they're going to be heading down a terrible path. So with girls, it tends to be more subtle. The point I'm trying to make is we may not realize the positive influence of this male because it tends to be more subtle. So what I hope people will do is find these males. If they don't find these males, if they feel there's danger or the child has been sexually abused or there's something where they're like, I don't want to bond this child with any males right now, then find one or two females who can provide challenge, risk, and a little bit of headbutting and a little bit of debating and a little bit of directing, who are just wired a little differently so they give a little more of the paternal. And it really helps girls actually when they marry later, when they hit the workplace later. One of the reasons girls often aren't working, they're not feeling in the workplace the kind of joy we want them to feel, is that quite often as kids, they didn't gain the skills to be able to compete with those guys in the workplace. So, okay.
So we're going to do something special with the kids. They're standing in the back. Keep them in the back for just a moment because I want to set this up. I want to give Michael a gift. And so tonight it'll be a surprise, all right? Because he doesn't know it's coming. Tomorrow it won't be a surprise, but he's going to act surprised. When we were in Israel, we had a half day off, and so a couple of guys and I we walked the walls of Jerusalem, and Jan and a friend went shopping. She was in the Jerusalem quarter, and she was captivated by a painting. And I'm going to give you a copy of the painting. The guy came out and he says, I noticed that you're sort of captivated with this painting. And Diane, do you have a picture of it? Did we get that? All righty. This is the picture. It is a picture of Dad blessing his son.
Oh, look.
And this is in front of the Western Wall, or what used to be called the Wailing Wall. All right? And so Jan's looking at this picture of a dad blessing his son at the wall in Jerusalem, the temple wall. And the man said to her, this is something that the world needs more of. Dads blessing their sons and their daughters, of course. So Jan told him, he said, well, my husband's a Lutheran pastor, and he's been working on these rites of passage for boys and girls and talking about how important it is. And he said, I want you to have this. So he gave her a copy of this picture. And the next day we went back, and I said, I've got to get one from Michael. And so we got you your own copy of blessing, and want to give that to you because it's so important for you and for what you do.
Thank you.
And so this ties into what we're going to do today. Michael is going to give the blessing. Now, Michael's a Jewish man, and this is going to be really impressive, so follow along. You are what?
A Kohen.
A Kohen. Now, anybody know what that is? Absolutely not. I didn't know what it is either, and I know Hebrew. Now, get this. This is going to be really fascinating. A Kohen is what?
So the Kohanim is plural, are descendants of Aaron. And so you may remember that.
Aaron was Moses' brother. He's the priest. All right?
Right, so you have In Judaism,
New York Times best-selling author and descendant of Aaron.
He's killing me.
Oh, my goodness.
It's just a coincidence. Most things in Judaism are passed down through the mother, right? They're matrilineal. Because 5,000 years ago, the feeling was, not sure who the dad was, but we know who the mom was, so most things are passed through matrilineal. But Kohen, that's passed down through the father. And there's actually a chromosome marker that they've discovered for it, scientists in Israel. So there's a chromosome marker for Kohanim. So the Kohen is the priest. And then you have the Levites, right, who take care of the temple, and then there's the Israelites. And I did it this way, but it's not a hierarchy. We're all equal. It's just that back then, the priests did have certain jobs, and it happens that it did pass down.
And so every once in a while, when there's some things that need to be done in the temple by a priest, they call on you.
Right. So there are certain things that only a Kohen is supposed to do at shul or at temple. And so sometimes there's about 10 or 12 of us in our temple.
Okay. So you're going to give the Kohen blessing. So explain to us, for all of you Star Trek fans, you're going to find this fascinating. All right? Explain to us this thing.
Okay, so the legend is, and I believe this is true, I'm going to put this, the legend is that when they were making Star Trek, so the original with William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, the legend is that they needed something, and you know, the thing that became live long and prosper. Well, this is actually what Leonard Nimoy, as a Kohen, would have been doing in temple or at shul. And the legend is that he said, let's just use the Kohen signal, because what the Kohanim or the Kohen do is we put our hands like this about an inch over the head of the person we are blessing, and we say the blessing in Hebrew. And so the legend is that that's why this exists, because he said, let's use that. And so they used it.
If you learned nothing tonight about girls, you just learned something really fascinating, didn't you? All right. So let's bring the girls up, and we're going to do a blessing for our girls up through 5th grade today, and then next week we'll do the boys, and then we're going to do our teenagers. So I'm going to ask, hi, sweetheart. I'm going to ask the girls to come on up, and if one of your girls is here, moms and dads, I want you to come on up and join in the blessing. And I'd also like some women just to come on up. And just don't be shy about it, because we've got some girls here tonight. Moms aren't here, dads aren't here. I want to make sure that every girl gets a touch from a woman somewhere, all right, for this blessing. Michael's going to do the Kohen blessing, all right? He's going to do it in Hebrew, then he's going to do it in English, all right? So why don't we do this? Let's have all the girls come on up front over here, all right? Can all the girls come in front, and I want you to face me, all right? Hi, sweetheart. You want to go with your mommy and daddy? Where are they?
Be happy.
Oh, there they are. All right, and grandma? Oh, you want me to hold you? Okay, I'll hold you. All right. Okay, we're going to go down here, and let's all, come around me, over here. Don't be shy. He's not going to hurt. He's going to give you a blessing to tell you how much God loves you, all right? So we've got all our daughters. I want everybody, we probably need some more women up here to touch some of the girls. Make sure everybody's, moms, dads, everybody's up here. Who's up here? All right, Jan, we got some girls. Women, just make sure you're touching somebody. Make sure everybody's touched, because touch is an important part of blessing. All right, we got more than 4 of us. All right, we'll be out of here by midnight. All right.
Anybody?
All right, everybody got somebody, and if everybody's touched, make sure that's okay. All right, excellent. Michael, do a blessing.
Yivarech Adonai v'ishmarech, Ya'er Adonai panav elech, v'hunech, Yisa Adonai panav elech, v'yasem lecha shalom. May God bless you and keep you. May God's countenance always shine upon you. And wherever you journey in this life, may you find peace.
Amen. Thank you very much. Let's give our girls a round of applause. Let them know we love them. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.